Hey, I want to welcome all of you to this session on the kingdom. I'm here with President Reinga, and we're going to do this via Zoom together, aren't we, Henry?
We are our first Christian Leaders Church service together on Zoom.
There we go. So we've been talking about the seven connections, your personal walk with God, your marriage walk with God, your family walk with God, your walk with God with your relationships, your friends. And the last time we talked about church and the church service and how all these connections in a way become your support system. And today we're going to talk about the kingdom, which is an even larger group than the church. Henry, how would you describe the kingdom? What does the kingdom mean to you?
To me, the kingdom is that whole culture of Christianity that reproduces itself. It's churches, but more churches. It's institute, educational places. It's books. It's tapes. It's people you meet that mentor you outside of your local church.
So it's you're in a local church, but the kingdom is made up of all the churches. So that's one thing, it's all the churches,
Yep.
but it's also this support system that has sort of just evolved, and we call them ministries.
Right.
Some people call them parachurches. What is the point of ministries? Why do you think that has developed?
Well, it's a mobilization of more gifts for launching more people, because one local church doesn't have all the expressions of some of those giftings and expertise and knowledge that can help the whole.
So, the passage I picked for our church service here today is from 1 Corinthians 12. And there it says that the Spirit gives gifts to every person for the common good. And I take that to mean not just the common good in a church, but the common good in all churches. And in fact, in all Christianity. So what you're saying is, on the one hand, we all need to be supported in our churches because, one little church can't do it all. And sometimes churches go up and down, they exist, they don't exist, they come and go. But the church universal is always there supporting the whole, but also that sometimes needs arise that churches can't handle. And so bright and talented, gifted people in different churches come together and form a ministry for a
Right.
specific need. Can you give a few examples of what you're talking about?
Well, let's just say chaplaincy. There's an example where chaplains serve as kingdom ministers in a lot of ways. I mean, they're at a local church, but they're also at a hospital. Ministry chaplains are at fire departments or police stations. Ministry chaplains serve in like nursing homes, and it's a kingdom. It's just beyond just a local church.
Right. So, I mean, even Christians have started hospitals, they've
Yeah.
started ministries to specific groups of people. Like I do personalized New Testaments and
Right.
with their own covers, and there's
Right.
NASCAR people, and there's ministries to policemen and fire departments,
Right.
and there's ministries to cowboys, there's
Yeah.
ministry to almost any segment of society that you can think of. There are people that have a love and a concern for that group of people. And though the church is always, a local church is busy with all the things that make a church go. You've got the nursery, you've got the sermons, you've got the service, you've got your programs, you've got the counseling. And it's hard for a church to develop specialized ministries into everything. And so what has happened is these what are sometimes called parachurches have developed, and now people that are gifted in those areas and specifically feel called to those areas do those things all under the umbrella of the church. So the
Right.
church in some ways is this incredibly rich place filled with all these gifts. 1 Corinthians 12 also said, the bulk of what Paul's talking about is how there's so many different gifts,
Right.
uh, and everyone in the body is gifted by the Holy Spirit. No one is exempt from that. say just something about, how in some ways historically we've divided the church into the clergy, as if
Right.
they're the ones gifted with the Spirit, and they're the ones gifted and given the task of all this ministry, and how First Corinthians 12 is really saying, no, 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 everyone is gifted by the Holy Spirit, and everyone has some kind of a ministry.
In the early church, it worked more purely that way, where there was a diversity of gifts, and there was credibility that people would acknowledge that. So there was some type of an ordaining process. There was competence. There was a training process that was not just in one local church, but a combinations. You see in the book of Acts, the school of Tyrannus. You see that there was a training thing, and then there was a confidence place where you'd have mentors working together, that somebody would have the confidence to do ministry. So you saw that. But then as the years went, by 300-400 years after the early church, things started moving toward the career-only leaders. So the career-only leaders, they became the clergy, and the people that were using their gifts in their community in ministry, that were not paid or not connected to the hierarchy, they were the laity. So what happened was the church in those days made a kingdom Christianity decision of laity and clergy. And now what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that back to that First Corinthians passage where, we have all these gifts. We're still interested in education, competence. We are interested in confidence, mentorship, encouragement. We are also interested in credibility, things like license and ordination, clergy that include everybody.
So just to step back a little bit, we're going to get into Christian Leaders Institute as one of those kingdom enterprises. Kingdom enterprises support the church on the one hand, all the local churches, and it also fulfills the role of taking on some of the tasks that the church can't quite get to.
Right.
We're going to talk about Christian Leaders Institute as an example or Christian Leaders Ministries as an example of that in a second. But just to step back a second and take a bigger view, I mean, why do we need kingdom kinds of things anyway? You need a personal walk with God. Of course, we have marriages, and, if you want God at the center, why not have a walk together in your marriage and your family and your friendship circle? And of course, the need for church. Why do we as human beings need, in some sense, to be a part of something larger? I mean, the kingdom is pretty large. Why do we need that?
Well, I mean, I can think of off the top of my head a few things. One is they're stewards of Christianity itself. Like we have the Bible, the New Testament was written Koine Greek, and those Bible books, sorry, were preserved in the Greek, and then passed down generation after generation, rewritten by scribes. And there was a kingdom function that worked for centuries, by which we have the Bible today. If that kingdom aspect wasn't done, we could not have the Bible as it is in its present form.
So in some ways, the kingdom holds us accountable. Otherwise, my church, I'm a pastor in a church. I could just make a bunch of decisions on my own,
Right.
and kind of go my own way. And we do see some of that, right? That's some of the dangers of just having church is, this pastor goes this direction, another pastor chooses to go a different direction, and we have sort of anarchy in Christendom. Whereas what you're saying is, no, there's sort of this body of coming together.
We have the same Bible, and we hold each other accountable to read the same Bible, and it's a kingdom function over centuries.
Right. And then just the need for, I think as human beings, we have a need to be a part of something bigger. For example, you and I know each other because we were a part of a bigger thing called the Dutch kingdom.
Yeah.
our ancestors came from the Netherlands at roughly the same time to the New World, and they came because of religious reasons. And my ancestors and yours believed in the Bible and believed in the church, and they ended up in the same denomination. We ended up working for the same denominational organization, planting churches.
Churches.
That's how we met. And your parents and my parents were raised with some of the same doctrines, and because of that we instantly had a connection. And we're part of the golf world. There's a whole world of golf, and because of that helped us connect. And as human beings, we both speak English. I mean, all these broader, bigger things are what helps kind of connect people to each other and help people, get mutual support and encouragement. You and I joined because, we were both planting churches, and we didn't feel the support from, our higher ups, because they weren't into the church planting thing. And we were connecting. Your church was in Chicago, mine was in Vancouver, and we just felt the need for mutual edification, support, challenge. You were doing some things differently than I, or I than you, and then we could learn from each other. And so I think that's true across the board in the kingdom. So we need to be a part of something bigger than our local situation.
When Jesus came along, he was talking about kingdom all the time. And he talked about it in its fullness at the kingdom, even that we are not totally aware of, the kingdom that includes angels, the kingdom of how nations are to bow before the King of Kings. And even when Jesus died on the cross, that was not for one church or for one group of believers. It was the blood that cleanses humans, all humans who profess Christ from sin. So, again, in a lot of ways, the whole setup is bigger than all of us. And then when Jesus said, greater things you will do. I'm leaving, but you all are going to take it to the next level. And it's better for you and better for everybody that I pass this ministry on to you. Yeah. So it's for us today, like it was 2,000 years ago for the Apostle Paul and Peter.
So I want to move towards Christian Leaders Ministries. That's okay. Kingdom enterprise that you and I are involved in, and everyone that's watching this. So why don't you just, in some ways, what are the sort of the big three entities that Christian Leaders Ministries it consists of?
The Institute. The Institute is all about competency, education, helping you see ministry training to help you take the next step in knowledge and insight, a study program that helps you become a confident Christian leader.
So, if someone just stumbled onto our thing right here, Christian Leaders Institute has what? It has courses.
Free ministry training courses, over 200 credit hours of classes and various topics all over the map, from classes like People Smart for Ministry, Greek,
right,
Old Testament survey, New Testament survey, thriving marriages, things related to that. Also things related to enterprise, because many of our ministers have to be bivocational. So they serve in ministry, but they have to support themselves. So we have enterprise classes that help them as well.
Now, as part of that system, there's certificates and, layers of certificates, and say something maybe about that.
Well, actually, at the Institute level, it's awards. Because in that sense, the classes are made to the highest standards of accreditation.
Right.
But the Institute gives out awards, so we are not under the standard of the U.S. Department of Education's credentialing standards, so that way we can venture into some other things without taken away the opportunity to reach more people and raise up more leaders.
And that way it can be free, right? I mean,
Yes.
and because it's free, and because we have 1 credit classes, we have 3
Yeah.
credit classes, and you can get awards after a few classes. You can get other awards that take a lot of classes or many years. And it's like I think what we're trying to do is like what is talked about in 1 Corinthians 12, that everyone has been gifted by God with the Spirit for the common good.
That's
And
right.
and the old system was sort of, go to school. You and I went to college and then seminary for 8 years, and then finally we got to do some ministry.
Right.
Whereas we're saying, no, we think everyone needs to be doing ministry, and let's not wait 8 years.
No.
I mean, you can take 8 years worth of Christian leaders classes.
Oh yeah, we like education.
Yeah, but we're just saying, let's get you doing stuff a whole lot sooner.
Yes, in your calling area, in your interest area, and let's get you going right away.
In the area that God may be calling you, and maybe God is calling you to something that requires 8 years worth of training, and we have that. Or maybe God is calling you to 4 weeks of training.
Right, we have that too.
In mind that you could learn in 4 weeks, and then he wants you out there doing it.
Yes.
Okay, so awards, it's free at the institute level. So then what's the college? Christian Leaders College is the second area of Christian Leaders Ministries.
Well, one of the things students asked for when they were taking these great courses, and they noticed that they were up to the standard of the U.S. Department of Education accreditation, they would be asking, well, why can't we get college degrees out of this? Well, the issue is that the structure of the United States society and education, there are 23 standards that have check marks that have to be checked, and there is a process, there's individualization, there are standards, all of that specific to people, not just the classes, specific to the organization, specific to claims that we make. It's a complicated issue. Right. So the college, it exists to apply those 23 standards specifically to each person that's taking classes at the institute. Then they enroll at the college. They're still on the institute site. They can do it all on the institute site. It's seamless. But the college holds them accountable to those standards so that when they graduate, then other colleges acknowledge that, okay, there's parity of standards in things such as admission policies, such as data policies, such as graduation rates. All of that is, and I give hats off to Dr. Fettis, who's overseeing that with Dr. James Hunt and Brianna, because, for me, that would make me stressed out. But there are people with the gifts that figure that stuff out so that if that's what you need, you have the opportunity to get a college degree and even go on to further studies at master's level.
So in some ways, Christian Leaders College is Christian Leaders Institute on steroids. I mean,
yeah. Or, it's the credibility of a college degree with the Christian Leaders Institute classes.
Right. And what's cool about that is it's cool that you can get college credit. I mean, right. An online seminary like this, but it's also cool from the institute point of view in that you're actually taking college level classes at the institute for free.
Right.
You don't need the credentialing and all of that.
Right.
So in some ways, the college is like really raising the bar for the institute, because there's no way we can be accredited unless the courses are at that level.
Right.
So, but what you're saying is for people that, and there are ministries that need that credentialing.
Yes.
Whatever people and students are getting into, they need more of a credentialing thing. And so I'll give
you an example about that. Okay, so in many ways, the lion's share of gifts are used in a voluntary way. So we want to take the volunteer Christian leaders and elevate them to a training program, and we want them to be able to use their gifts as volunteers, but have the same excellence in training that the career people have. Now, in the career, let's just go back to that chaplain idea. So if you want to be a chaplain in the United States and get paid for it, you really have to get a degree at Christian Leaders Institute, and then go on to a seminary and get a degree from there, and then do all these career-oriented things to be a chaplain. But you can get your bachelor degree at Christian Leaders Institute, college, at Christian Leaders College based on the Christian Leaders Institute classes, and then you can get your master's degree from there, and the bachelor degree currently only costs $2,650 versus a bachelor degree that will cost you tens of thousands of dollars someplace else. Right. But there's an example where at a volunteer level, you can be a volunteer licensed ministry chaplain at a local fire department or a hospital, and you're volunteering, you're retired, we're giving you training and chaplaincy and all of that stuff, and it's a beautiful thing. But if you're going to get paid for it, now you're talking, it's a different ballgame.
Okay. So we have the degree thing, which is at the college, and we have the high level classes that can be used for your degree, or can be used just for awards at the institute.
Right. And by the way, there are, like, you can get an official award, and that's a fee, or being part of the Vision Partners program.
Right.
But the training's free, and the digital credentials are free.
Yes. But then for a lot of other, some people need the credentials to be able to do their ministry. That's the college. But for others, maybe they don't need the credentialing so much, but they need the ordination, the recognition, or the license
status. Yes.
So why don't you tell us how then the Christian Leaders Alliance sort of fulfills that need?
Right. Well, first of all, we believe that clergy includes not only the career people, it includes the part-time people, bivocational, and includes volunteers. So that is a belief that we have at our core level. Now, from that belief, that means we're called to provide a structure and a system for the volunteers, for part-time, and for career. So what we do at the Alliance is we created a structure, many people call it a church order, where people take studies appropriate for their clergy role, and then they have to submit recommendations from other people who testify that they are godly and called into ministry. And then there's a process by which they become licensed or ordained clergy members. Now, to someone who's just starting out, there's a licensure program, or someone who's retired, who doesn't have a lot of time for study. I just want to get busy in one specific thing. The licensure program could be perfect. But many want to proceed into part-time ministry or go into career ministry, and we offer training and then the ordination that goes all the way up to 120 hours. Like the minister of the word is 120 hours of education. So the ordination connects to a lot of training. So wherever you are, we want to try to give credibility so you have confidence, because we know it, with taking these classes, you're getting competence. So we're trying to put that all together so that the clergy, the Christian Leaders Alliance is about the volunteer clergy, the part-time clergy, or the career clergy.
So maybe just say something about what the Alliance is. Is this alliance of churches? Is this alliance of leaders?
It's an alliance of leaders.
Okay.
It is, traditionally, that's a good question. In the denomination that we were from, it was an alliance in the sense of churches. And then the local churches sent delegates to a meeting, and that was picked up actually from the Catholic Church. Then it went to the Protestant Church, and they even used some of the Catholic words, synod, and all of those things. It was almost like the Protestant version of the Catholic structure. Right. The early church, the way the Alliance picked it up, it was a much more decentralized group of leaders where the Apostle Paul says, don't get too caught up in following any one leader. I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, don't get into that. But the leaders created the early structure through identifying new gifted Christians, putting some type of a training, a mentorship thing, and then acknowledging, I commend to you Phoebe, a diaconus, a deacon. I don't say, follow me, I'm a leader. No, others say that. There's a structure by which that's taken place.
Okay. So can I join Christian Leaders Alliance if I'm in another denomination, or if I'm in another church alliance? If I become a leader in the Christian leaders world, do I have to be one or the other?
In this world, because it's a leader credentialing organization, you can be in both.
Okay.
Our goal is to give that credibility, that certification, that there is a process that is recognized by most governments, the United States government and most throughout the world. It is recognized as a credible process by other Christian leaders and other denominations. Many, for instance, who are ordained with Christian Leaders Alliance get welcomed into other ordinations within their denomination. So we call that ecuministry clergy, ecumenistic license, ecuministry license, ecuministry ordination.
So in some ways, the institute and the college are ways that we recognize that you have learned something and you have credibility now with at least your learning part.
Yes.
And the alliance is more about making sure that other people recognize that you have learned some things and that you're maybe using your gifts in the kingdom, and people say, yes, we believe that this person is doing good things in the kingdom, and we want to recognize that.
One thing I want to add to that, Steve, is in some ways we have organizations today that just ordain people or license people just by sending in money. Right. And on the other hand, like you and I, we went to seminary for 8 years in college seminary, and still we weren't launched to do anything. Okay, and what Christian Leaders Alliance is seeking to do, and you are a great part of that. I mean, you and I, this has been a project that the ministry board assigned us to really work on, is how to have it where, back to the common good, back to that passage in 1 Corinthians, where each of you have different gifts. And those gifts need education, they need recommendations, they need credibility for your confidence. Right. And that's what we're trying to do.
Right. At every level. So
at every level.
Yeah, instead of you and I were on the 8-year track, you can finally do some ministry after 8 years. We're saying, no, let's get people doing something after 3 weeks.
Right.
So we have things that take, what's the shortest thing?
Well, you can be a licensed Christian wedding officiant in about 4 weeks is the average time that you can become that. And you need one recommendation.
So, but in that 4 weeks, you're going to have to learn some things.
Oh yeah, it's 4 credits, and those credits, one of them is a wedding officiant skills. It's not that hard, and the connections class just kind of gives you an introduction to ministry. So it's not as academic as, let's say, when you work to be a minister of the word, you're even learning Greek. It's harder.
It's a several-year process.
Yeah.
So we have get going right away.
Yep.
And it's going to take quite a while, and every single thing in between.
And even things like life coach minister, we have a license and an ordination designation for life coach minister, which is sort of a new cool thing that is starting to happen. And by the way, people are participating in that. It just started last year. In 2019, and the response here in 2020 is very surprising and very encouraging.
I think, in part because, ordinary people can get going.
Yes.
One of the frustrations I had when I went to seminary is, and I know a lot of my classmates, we were all frustrated because we were there because we wanted to do something.
Yes. I
And then
remember
we were
that.
kind of losing
Yeah.
our faith as we
Yeah.
had to wait so long to be able to do
Yeah.
something. All right. So in all the other connections, we talked about habits, the glass,
Right.
how the talking and listening and talking, prayer, listening, Bible, and then getting a habit of daily devotions in your personal life, your marriage, your family, church. We meet once a week. So at the kingdom level, it's harder, to get some of these habits because, with the church, it's there every Sunday. So how and of course, we're just using Christian Leaders Ministries as an example of the kingdom thing. There are a lot of other kingdom enterprises going on that are trying to do the same kind of thing in
Right.
terms of, being a support to the church and so on. So what habit kinds of things do you see in Christian Leaders Ministries?
Well, at the Institute, which really helps all of the other ministries, we have a computer interface. And it's from Moodle, which is the top educational interface in the world. And we have that one. And we figured out how to do grades, and it's asynchronous correspondence types of classes. We have professors. We have topics are weeks. So each week there's a habit. Okay. This week I want to get this topic done. So you go through the whole thing. It's a habit. Maybe you have a habit on Saturday and on Wednesday or other days. And that's when you study. And it's the Institute provides the glass. Now the content is the water. I mean, you want to get trained and you want to be confident. The glass is the computer interface. That's an example of the glass and the water.
So we sort of take the content, but we separate it into those weeks. Now, a person doesn't have to do it every.
No.
He can do it quickly. He can do it as long as he wants. But just the structure itself, in terms of looking at it, sort of helps students get organized. They can see how many there are. They can sort of judge how quickly they've done the last few, and then how long it's going to take. And then they can look at their schedule and they can start, we can't make anyone do anything, just like we
It's got to be repeatedly, like you've said many times.
right. And the same thing is true about people's devotions. We can't
Yeah.
make anybody do anything, and people have to figure out how it interacts with their week and their day. But we've made it so that people can do that. What are some other ways that we're trying to get a few habits going in terms of interacting with?
Well, we have the Christian Leaders Network,
Right.
which is like a social network, and then the habit of logging in and connecting to others. We also have a Vision Partners program, and I think that's pretty exciting because here you get to study for free, but you get to contribute that others can study for free. I think that's pretty fun. And even when you pay for fees, in a sense, everything's part of the Vision Partners program. Everything, all the income that comes in at Christian Leaders Institute is to get more classes, more opportunities, more launching of more ministers and more Christian leaders.
So Abby is in charge of that program, and she does a
Yep.
weekly
Christian Leaders News, yep.
news, and that's like a habit to help people stay connected, keep focused, because online, the beauty of online is you can do it anytime, and the challenge of online is you can do it anytime.
Yes.
So to establish some habits, and so even the weekly news, hopefully many students tune into that. It helps you be connected. It helps you connect with what's going on outside of your little world, and that's what the kingdom is, right? The kingdom isn't just myself and my walk, my family, my friends, my church. It's what is God doing everywhere else, and knowing that and being a part of that helps me in my personal walk, in my marriage walk, in my family walk, in my friendship walk, in my church walk. Being a part of Christian Leaders Institute for myself helps me with my own walking with God. I hear the story. So, Vision Partners and
The
this
stories.
needs this person needs help, and this is what this person is doing. And the network where people are sharing what's going on and their needs and their joys and the prayers and all the different things that are going on come back and help you. So in some ways, we're in this together, just like First Corinthians 12 says, we're
We
all
have mentors, we have volunteers. They're all kingdom people.
right.
And they're helping each other. And some of the mentors, it's incredible to me that all of the culture of kingdom is happening throughout 180 nations where Christian Leaders Institute is part of now.
So in January, we were in Africa, and
Yes.
so we did a bit of a tour, and we met with students from all over the place. And that too is part of the Kingdom Connection. We were meeting some of these people for the first time, but they were also meeting each other for
Right.
the first time. And maybe you could say something about the interaction between participants, not with us, but
Right.
with other participants.
Well, what we've learned is that new clusters of kingdom leaders are connecting. For instance, in South Africa, we have a director who is a graduate, and she is just doing a great job connecting people. Just crazy amazing. And then in Uganda and in Kenya, there are volunteers are connecting. They had even, like, they've done videos so that when a new a Kenyan leader comes in at Christian Leaders Institute, they get a Kenyan produced welcome video. So it's stuff like that's happening everywhere, and I find that incredible that God is raising up kingdom leaders. You had said something earlier. I want to get back to before we leave this. A benefit to people who actually complete habits. We've noticed, because there's no tuition here, there's no high expense, that if people will do the habits of doing the training and all of that, it's a different kind of person. About 80% of the people who start never do anything. They start at Christian Leaders Institute and they quit. Yeah. But it's close to 20% now who internally will actually submit themselves to the habits of talking, listening repeatedly to actually accomplish anything. Right. Well, when we've gone on these trips, one thing we've often said, Steve and I have often said, what we see is that these are self-motivated or God-motivated, Holy Spirit-motivated people who really want to make a difference for Jesus Christ, because nobody's forcing them to actually do the work.
Right. So, but we're trying to, like you said, it's up to 20%. It was lower before, right?
Oh, it used to be 10%. Now it's, yeah.
So what do you attribute the gain in 10%?
I think it's more people, more encouragement, more support, other people who come alongside, the availability of volunteer mentors, the availability of volunteers, the recruiting of current graduates who recruit others, and then put a structure in their life to keep them accountable. There's so many reasons for it, but it's still, it's that structure side. As Christian Leaders Institute grows, it seems like with that, a kingdom structure is growing. The ordained leaders, the licensed leaders, all of that are creating a structure that's encouraging others.
So basically you're saying it's because we're doing better at the Kingdom Connection.
I would suppose that's right, yeah.
Right? We're putting more teeth into the Kingdom Connection with now we're trying to do some Zoom meetings and
right.
that people can connect the network, the classes themselves, classes where people can get started quicker, and we're trying to meet more of the kingdom needs in some way. We're getting better and better at identifying who are the Christians out there, what do they need to get going. I mean, even this whole licensing thing, maybe you can just say something about that. That's a new thing that you've been working on.
Yes, we're really excited. You know, when Steve and I were tasked to put that alliance together, the first thing was really the structure for the ordained leaders, because we were addressing the current conversations of ordination.
Right.
But as time went on, we realized that, you know, a lot of people, they have one specific thing they want to do, like they want to do a wedding or perform a wedding for their niece. Okay, fine. Well, we don't want them to go to a license or ordained thing, pay $150 and get a phony, or, you know, it's legal, but you know what I'm saying? It's like not, they're not really being prepared for anything, and they're Christians and they want to do it sincerely. Well, what about something right there? But there are so many more roles as licensure to test it out, to see where this might go, and then go on a path. Hey, some of those who start at a licensure level of just doing a simple wedding might end up being a minister of the word, ordained minister of the word. So let's create a whole culture, a whole cultivation system of launching more credible ministers.
You know, in some ways, that's my story. I didn't decide all of a sudden to go to seminary. I was in college my first year, and then a summer program came up, and I went to Ogden, Utah for the summer. And I was in this little tiny church, and the pastor inadvertently just asked if I wanted to do one of the services. And all of a sudden, I'm preaching a service and
Right.
I'm doing ministry. I'm knocking on people's doors and trying to lead people to Christ, you know, with like a week's worth of training. I had no training whatsoever for my sermon, and you know, but it was because someone gave me an entry level way into this thing.
Yes.
I was like, hey, I didn't know I was any good at this. I didn't know I had any gifts. I didn't know that the Spirit, as First Corinthians 12, had given me any of these particular gifts for the building up of His kingdom. And it was only because someone gave me a chance to try a few things out that I discovered that maybe I had some potential.
Right. You know, in what we didn't have, I had that same background, is that they held the clergy thing away from us, though.
Right.
You know, they basically said, no, that's 7 years from now. Whereas we're saying, you know, do people see you as a minister now? Let's start with one recommendation. And then further on, it's 2 recommendations. And then 3 recommendations for ordination. And there's study programs. And, you know, there is no perfect system. I know that as thousands upon thousands are licensed or ordained, there will be people who will fall away. Look at the early church. Right. But our structure is to try to launch you into ministry where you're at and take your next step, so that you can be more effective, more confident, more credible, and more competent to serve the Lord.
Well, Henry, thanks for joining me on this particular session. And